Okay, this is day 224, number 5, and we're going to drill down a little bit more on this April 29th. And again, this is working theory now. We don't actually have a lot of proof, and I'll say when we have proof points, this is going to be short for 2016. Okay, so if you remember in the previous episode that I did here, is I said this DCCC hack, or it's also called the DCCC is the shorthand. Is going to be in the up on Capitol Hill. That's where the servers are going to be. I don't know if there's actually going to be servers in the actual DNC building on Ivy Street or not. But interesting, if you read this article in the Boston Globe the Boston Globe article I talked about, where it said this Tahir calls Amy Dacey. Now there's a Tahir one.
Tameen.
Oh, Tameen, okay. But there's a Tameen, a pretty low-level person that calls Amy Dacey and informs that all the passwords are taken for this DCCC system. Now, I don't know if people know this or not, but in the Congress, you have what's known as the business side and the campaign side. And nary the two shall meet. You're not supposed to put business stuff. You're supposed to have that on a separate server, big firewall in between, and then you have campaigns files on this side. So that's why you have usually two separate locations. That's why you have a Democratic National Headquarters, for instance. And I'm thinking that the servers are going to be on Capitol Hill, but I don't know for sure. Anyway, this has been largely forgotten, this Democratic DCCC hack. And there's an article in NBC News that comes out on July 29th, 2016. And I'm sorry I'm away from my slides on my computer today, but I'm going to just have to make do with this. So now the key thing is, they say it starts in April and it's discovered that all these passwords are hacked. And then I don't know if you remember that May 4th email. And I believe I can't remember who it's from now, but it says, we need Debbie Wasserman Schultz's password. It's and then
Amy Kroll.
Amy Kroll, and it's on her laptop, and Imran has it. Well, it's interesting because what I believe is happening, since this DCC information down here is also NGP-VAN, they're moving it over here. Because on the 5th of May, and again, that's documented evidence, this is documented evidence, this is documented. On the 5th of May, they're moving it into the DNC. And this is all the voter expansion database. Again, this is the campaign files. This is all the NGP-VAN. This is the vote builder, right, with the existing voters. This is voter expansion. And it's also that Catalyst program. And that's where you're going to find the fun. That's going to be Harold Ix, right? Or Ikes. How do you say it?
I have no idea. Ickies?
Yeah.
Ikes.
So it's interesting that on May 4th they need Debbie Wasserman Schultz's password. A week before, there's a hack over here where they say the other passwords were received. You're going to be able to go into and get all the campaign information for all the local candidates. So you're going to not only control the national campaign if you get this information, but you're also going to control all the congressional races, all the way down to the state races, because NPG-VAN is used in the state races as well. So if you have all that door knocker information where people are going in and refreshing it and so forth, and now you have CrowdStrike staying there until the 15th, and then Guccifer issues his WordPress leak the same day that CrowdStrike releases their report. Now that's just very interesting timing, that CrowdStrike, after being there 6 weeks, after getting Debbie Wasserman Schultz's password on May 4th and getting all the other passwords before, on the 29th, it's almost like they were going through every member of Congress' passwords and moving it over into this system. And then finally the last one they needed was Debbie Wasserman Schultz, May 4th. And then they're there 6 weeks, and then they release their report, and then the same day, Guccifer 2 announces the leaks. So, and then the follow-up to this, obviously, is right before this weekend, there's this massive server wipe with a cloth of all the, no, it's like they take all the files off, either on the 27th through the 30th or on the 3rd through the 10th, one of those 2 weeks. Before they finish their time there. In their time there, they have this massive shutdown where they completely reboot the phone system and they completely reboot the server system. Is there anything that you'd add to that timeline?
Well, it's just interesting because when CrowdStrike was called in, and that would have been that March or that May 5th, they noticed that the DCC, the DCCC, was also breached, but in March. Don't know how they would have known that because it doesn't say here that they did any forensics on the DCCC at that time. But the interesting thing is that the DNC learned that the DCCC was hacked in March, but they didn't tell them, because they didn't want the information to leak out, right. Which makes no sense that you wouldn't let all of your congressional people know that there's been a breach in their system. And that's what then led to when Guccifer 2, whoever he is, started releasing all of the congressional election races in each state. That was pulled from the DCCC.
Right. So it's almost like the DCCC, it's almost like they suppressed the leak of DCCC so that none of the Congress would know that their systems were breached. And then they moved that data over to the national system because it was also NGP-VAN. So not only controlling the donations, because in NGP-VAN you have the donor information and you also have the volunteer information. That would give you access to both of those for all the congressional districts down to the state level. So that's interesting. At least the it would give you the U.S. congressmen's donors and the U.S. congressmen's volunteers.
All Democratic, yeah. It's just also interesting that CrowdStrike would never mention the fact that Imran Awan had access to Debbie Wasserman Schultz's DNC emails at the same time, who would also have had access to the congressional leaders at the DCCC, because that goes back to all of everything you've been talking about with the A1s.
He's not mentioned. That's critical.
He's never mentioned.
He's never mentioned. And if this person had access to a password, obviously,
right?
And we have a hack. We know the data is missing. Then you would think, being a foreign national, etc.,
well, correct,
that he would be in the report at least,
right? Of who is this person, and then whoever I have never found where it says who actually did the forensics on the DCC computers or servers that CrowdStrike put it in their report and told the DNC that the DCCC was hacked in March. A month and a half, 2 months before them, but shh, don't tell anyone because we can't let it out. But who was CrowdStrike the one that did the DCCC? Because as of right now, in every report, the FBI is the one who started the DCCC forensics in late
FBI
July.
Would have known both, yeah. They would have known both.
Right. So, but the FBI wasn't allowed to look at the DNC servers or computers, and we know CrowdStrike was wiping clean everything. But the FBI is allowed to look at the DCCC servers and computers after CrowdStrike's report.
I see what you're saying.
So who's the one that gave the information that the DCCC was hacked at a month before?
Right. I see what you're saying. It's like Hillary had no problem letting the FBI look at the DCC servers. Right. But she didn't let them look at the DNC servers. Only CrowdStrike had access to those.
Only CrowdStrike had access, but they also wiped everything clean. But CrowdStrike is grouping the DCCC hack in March of 2016 together because he attributes the DCC hack to Fancy Bear and then says that Fancy Bear was in the DNC for about a week or so. But he attributes the full DNC hack, which we know is a leak, to Cozy Bear. How would CrowdStrike know that the DCCC was hacked with Fancy Bear if they did not look at the DCCC's computers? Where is he getting that information?
Yeah, so CrowdStrike would have had to know. Yeah, and I think that's a cover basically because they probably started moving files somewhere in April, and they were about done on the end of the 29th of April.
If they were here and they were almost done with the moving of the data over to the NGP-VAN.
They moved it over in June.
Yeah, well, and then they load the whole thing up here on July 7th, a few days before Seth Rich is killed, and they send that up.
And that's why the FBI can't
Foundation.
look at the servers.
That's why, yeah.
And they wiped everything clean.
Yeah. So anyway, that's our second installment.